There was nothing that made me happier than throwing that guy over to the fucking PFL.
Every competitor in the high-stakes world of mixed martial arts MMA enters the octagon ready to face fists, anger, and fear. But very few ever face the fights that take place outside the ropes. Francis has spent years honing his strength, skill, and mental tenacity inside the cage. His mere presence compels attention. His path from the dusty streets of Cameroon to becoming one of the world's most feared heavyweights is the epitome of tenacity and unadulterated talent. However, the most intense conflict of his career is now characterized by a clash of personalities, egos, and legacies. A storm building beyond the spotlight, rather than by blows, takedowns, or championship belts. And Dana White, the guy who once supported him, stands in the middle of it. A single gesture, a hand on a chest, has sparked debate, examination, and conjecture, leaving the world to wonder who is actually in charge in the UFC and elsewhere. This is a collision of trust, authority, and identity, rather than just a disagreement about contracts or money, and its effects will be felt well beyond the octagon. When Dana White spoke on the Flagrant podcast, the MMA world sat up, unprepared for the intensity and rawness of his words. Gone were the carefully rehearsed statements and corporate filters. What emerged was the Dana White that fighters and fans have known for decades: unflinching, confrontational, and brutally honest. Every sentence seemed to carry the weight of personal history, calculated to provoke thought, emotion, and debate. He did not merely recount events, he dissected them, layering professional disappointment with personal reflection, painting a portrait of a man grappling with betrayal, frustration, and the pressure of maintaining control in a sport defined by chaos. As the world listened, it became clear that this was not another media moment, but a pivotal chapter in the story of two of MMA's most dominant personalities. White presented leaving as a moment that revealed the brittleness of allegiance and the instability of ego. Rather than merely as a breach of contract, he guided viewers through their relationship's trajectory, emphasizing times of cooperation, mentoring, and mutual success, but not avoiding disagreement and misunderstandings. White's ability to combine anger and vulnerability was remarkable. He acknowledged the challenge of leading great fighters, the weariness of botched talks, and the delicate balance between developing talent and maintaining organizational integrity. The audience could feel the underlying frustration of a guy who had made significant investments in a boxer he formerly thought was virtually impenetrable, so each revelation carried weight. The MMA community erupted in response. Analysts, fighters, and fans dissected every nuance of White's statements, debating the implications for reputation, for White's credibility, and for the UFC itself. Some praised the transparency, noting the rarity of such candor in sports management. Others criticized the public airing of grievances, suggesting it could inflame tensions, destabilize the heavyweight division, or even undermine career trajectory. Yet regardless of perspective, the moment was undeniably transformative. Dana White had elevated a contractual dispute into a conversation about human complexity, ego, and legacy in professional sports. Central to White's narrative was his insistence on recognizing raw talent. While simultaneously critiquing the circumstances of his departure, he lauded the former champion's knockout power, his meteoric rise, and the spectacle he brought to the UFC, yet he refused to ignore the confrontations, miscommunications, intentions that had fractured their bond. The interplay of acknowledgement and critique created a cinematic dynamic, a story at once biographical, confessional, and confrontational. With stakes that went far beyond titles and pay-per-view numbers, the account of the alleged confrontation, particularly the hand-on chest moment, sent shockwaves through the community. Fans, analysts, and fighters were forced to reevaluate the narrative, surrounding a man whose physical dominance in the octagon had seemed untouchable. Could the same ferocity and assertiveness translate into personal interactions, or was it a misinterpretation magnified by perception? The ambiguity was explosive. Social media erupted, hashtags trended, and debates raged over temperament. professionalism, and intent. The difficulties of managing a multinational sports empire were also made clear by Dana's account. A careful balance was needed to manage warriors of this caliber. Authority, respect, and trust were continuously put to the test. The event demonstrated the brittleness of relationships in high-stress situations where reputations are crucial and stakes are high. Analysts questioned whether this fight will redefine legacy in terms of perception, reputation, and influence within the UFC ecosystem rather than in terms of wins. Into this storm stepped, composed and measured, taking the conversation to a different level. On Ariel Helwani's show, he projected calm authority, refusing to match White's aggression. Every word was deliberate, every pause strategic. He highlighted that truth exists independently of public narrative, subtly shifting the burden of proof back to Dana White and relying on evidence over rhetoric. His reference to UFC headquarters surveillance was not merely a defense, it was a statement of discipline, strategy, and intellectual control. Demonstrating a power that transcended fists, measured approach highlighted a critical lesson. True dominance is not only about physical feats, but about navigating public scrutiny, perception, and ego with precision. By choosing composure over confrontation, he signaled that legacy is determined by choices, resilience, and strategic thinking. The public witnessed a masterclass in controlling narrative without surrendering. Authenticity skill as formidable as any strike delivered inside the octagon. Not only did he respond calmly, but the news that he would soon be a free agent increased the tension. The ramifications were enormous. He had the freedom to reshape his career, change his course, and defy expectations on his own terms for the first time in years. Both the MMA and boxing communities were rocked by rumors of possible UFC bouts with Jon Jones or a high-profile boxing contest versus Deontay Wilder. Fans, fighters, and commentators were kept on edge by his deliberate assertion of control over his story in every speech, gesture, and hint. Dana White's counter-narrative was swift and uncompromising. By framing as a bad guy rather than a negotiator or athlete, he attempted to recast the discussion into a moral evaluation. Further intensifying public scrutiny, analysts debated the ethical, psychological, and strategic dimensions of these comments, highlighting the tension between personal character judgments and professional sports management. The exchanges underscored the volatile mix of ego, authority, and perception that defines elite combat sports. The Boston incident, as described by White, became emblematic of the broader challenges in handling elite fighters. White positioned himself as a mentor, a strategist, and a man safeguarding an organization he helped build. He recounted moments when he saw potential, his charisma, and marketability, framing himself as a gatekeeper and protector. Yet, according to White, one confrontation revealed a troubling side of character, a side that forced reconsideration and caution. His mantra, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them," resonated with followers, reinforcing the stakes of trust and perception in professional sports' approach to the narrative. In contrast, reflected evolution and maturity. By refusing to react emotionally, he emphasized the importance of agency, focus, and legacy. Every decision, every word, was about preserving his path and reframing the narrative in a way that reinforced his professional and personal growth. The MMA community took note, recognizing that true power in elite competition often lies in strategic restraint rather than immediate reaction. The suspense deepened as fans speculated about his next move. Would return to the UFC, challenging Jon Jones and reclaiming dominance in familiar territory? Would he pursue boxing ambitions against Wilder, merging to sports and testing his limits? Or would he carve an entirely new path, exploring other promotions and asserting independence? Each scenario carried enormous stakes, with implications not just for his career, but for the larger combat sports landscape. The complex dance between authority, reputation, and personal preference is revealed in this developing story. Story reminds the world that the biggest struggles are frequently fought in the heart and head in a sport that is fixated on physicality. His cool-headed, methodical handling of the dispute shows that legacy is created by strategic choices, emotional intelligence, and the guts to take independent action in addition to successes. The story is a study in contrasts. Dana White, forceful, raw, and uncompromising. Composed, strategic, and deliberate. Together, they create a narrative rich in suspense, drama, and ethical complexity. Fans are drawn not just to fights in the octagon, but to the human struggles, decisions, and personalities that define elite competition. The tension between public perception and private reality creates a narrative tension that is as compelling as any championship bout as prepares for his next chapter. Free from contracts and the constraints of expectation, the MMA world watches with bated breath. The lessons extend far beyond sport. Resilience, agency, and strategic decision-making define true power. Legacy is not just measured in victories, but in the ability to rise above conflict. Control one's story and navigate the pressures of fame and expectation has been unstoppable in the cage. Outside of it, he now has to contend with equally difficult obstacles: legacy, perception, and the scrutiny of a drama-loving audience. The public has seen both sides of this story. Dana White's careful reserve and her unvarnished confrontation. The interaction reminds us that mixed martial arts MMA is as much about human drama as it is about fists and titles by crafting a gripping, emotionally driven story that goes beyond the sport itself. The saga remains unresolved, the tension palpable, and the stakes higher than ever. Francis Ngannou stands at a crossroads, wielding both physical power and the ability to control his own narrative. Every choice he makes now carries consequences that ripple far beyond the octagon. Fans, analysts, and fellow fighters watch closely, speculating on his next move, weighing every statement, every hint, every subtle gesture. Will he return to the UFC to face old rivals on his own terms? Or will he carve an entirely new path in the sport, blending MMA with boxing or exploring opportunities that defy conventional expectations? Each decision has the potential to redefine not just his career, but the broader perception of what it means to be a champion, someone who commands respect, sets their own terms, and refuses to be confined by legacy, politics, or the expectations of others. In a world driven by headlines and controversy, has chosen to define himself on his own terms, a strategist, and a man shaping his destiny with intention and resolve. As the dust settles, one truth is undeniable: this story is far from over. Dana White and Francis have crafted a chapter remembered not for what happened inside the cage, but for what unfolded beyond it, a story of power, ambition, loyalty, and the courage to define one's own legacy. And as steps forward, free to carve his own path, the world watches, waiting to see how one of MMA's most formidable forces will assert dominance, not just through strikes, but through resilience, strategy, and the unyielding pursuit of personal greatness. What makes this narrative so compelling is not merely the clash between fighter and promoter, but the human stakes intertwine with professional ambition. Francis is no longer just a competitor. He has become a symbol of self-determination, a living testament to the idea that strength is measured not only in physical might, but in the capacity to navigate adversity with patience, clarity, and foresight. For years, fans have seen him dismantle opponents in the octagon with a precision that bordered on artistry. But now, the arena has expanded. The cage is no longer the defining space of his battles. Contracts, public perception, and the struggle to maintain agency over one's career have become the new battlegrounds. And here, mastery is as psychological as it is physical. The significance of his departure from the UFC transcends contractual disagreements or promotional disputes. It is a narrative of liberation, of breaking free from constraints that once defined his professional trajectory. For Dana White, the former mentor turned adversary, the tension exposes the delicate balance between power and loyalty in a sport built on both spectacle and strategy. The public has been granted a front row seat to observe not just personalities in conflict, but the consequences of ambition meeting authority, ambition meeting scrutiny, and ambition meeting the unwavering standards of a global audience. In this collision of worlds, has emerged as a fighter who understands the stakes far beyond the octagon, who recognizes that legacy is not handed down by titles or accolades, but claimed through deliberate action, personal integrity, and the courage to face unknown challenges head-on. Every move makes now carries monumental weight. His choices will shape not only the perception of him as an athlete, but the broader conversation about autonomy and respect within professional MMA. The world is watching to see whether he will return to the UFC on his own terms, negotiate bouts in rival organizations, or cross into boxing to face some of the sport's biggest names. Each path represents not just a career decision, but a defining moment in the evolution of a fighter whose life story has been marked by resilience, determination, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. In the same way that a single knockout punch can alter the course of a fight, a single decision can recalibrate the trajectory of his entire legacy. The contrast between white and black gives this story more nuance. As the creator of the UFC empire, Dana White stands for the weight of organizational legacy, authority, and control. Embodies the quest for individual autonomy, fortitude in the face of criticism, and the unrelenting determination to define success according to his own standards. A story that combines drama, suspense, and contemplation. The conflict between the two is evident. The narrative is compelling because it captures the larger human struggle of defending one's identity, preserving one's independence, and overcoming internal and external influences that try to control one's destiny. As moves forward, his story offers lessons beyond MMA. It is about understanding the value of patience, the strategic use of silence, and the power of emotional intelligence in moments of public pressure. In stepping away from conflict without capitulating to fear or impulse, he demonstrates that true strength is measured not only in dominance over opponents, but in mastery over one's choices, one's narrative, and one's future. In doing so, he transforms from an athlete into a symbol, representation of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of self-defined greatness. The world waits as a result. The tension increases with every day that goes by, while the next chapter of Francis' adventure remains unwritten. Will he return to the UFC to take on seasoned fighters? Will he take on new challenges and forge his own route outside of accepted norms? Or will he completely alter combat sports, combining skill, strategy, and spectacle to create something never seen before? Whichever option is selected, one thing is certain: Francis is no longer merely a warrior. He is a force whose legacy will be shaped by his bravery in standing for himself, his ability to negotiate complexity with wisdom, and his resolve to achieve greatness on his own terms.